Hello, football fans. Welcome back to another episode of Hurdle the Line. Yes, it's Monday, so that means it's more football from Hurdle the Line, an AAW network show. Tonight with me, I have Tom, I have Batch, and me, your host, Chapman. Gentlemen, good evening. How are we?
Good evening, young man. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sure, just like all of you, I'm just living off the fumes of what was a very active free agency period. But Batch, I know for us personally, it's been a really big day because finally the Kansas City Chiefs have a quarterback, and I just it's after this long slog. Justin Fields has come into the building to finally lift this franchise up into new heights. Tom, how are you feeling about that?
I'm actually quietly excited about it, just from the fact that I don't think the Chiefs have had a great backup quarterback situation the last few seasons. First Carson Wentz, and then last season it was Gardner Minshew. Um, Before that we had Chad Henne, who I think was a real serviceable backup. But to get Justin Fields in, I think it's a good move because I think it kind of shows that the Chiefs are a bit bullish on Mahomes starting week one. So maybe just kind of ease him back in, and it gives Justin Fields a bit more of a chance than he may have had behind some of those terrible offensive lines that he's had to play behind. So hopefully, he can get a bit of experience and then maybe be able to, find another place in the league. But yeah, I'm happy for him, and he's the one that actually picked KC over a bunch of other opportunities that he could have had. So.
We all know if there had been a decent backup in that Super Bowl 59, it could have been a whole different ball game. It could have been, anyway. And also, kudos to Tom. I open with a joke and just kind of a fun thing, and then Tom does a whole like solid 90 seconds of analyzing Justin Field. And what I'm sure we're all been very concerned about, which is the backup quarterback situation over the last few seasons in Kansas City. So thank you, Tom. Consummate professional, which you would expect as an AAW network show. So this is the kind of stuff we're bringing you guys. And we're not even pros. We're not even getting paid for this. Fletch does not pay us, guys. We're just doing this all the time. All right. So we have a little bit of just, we're going to go through the last, we came on last Monday when all the stuff was happening. We got to talk about a lot of different deals, one of which happened, I believe, was it the day after we got off, or was it that day that we were talking about the two number one picks going to the Raiders for Maxx Crosby? Was it that day? I can't remember.
I
Did we
think it
talk
was the
about it?
day after, but
It was the
yeah.
day after, yeah. So we're going to get into that. We know we're a little late on this, but we're going to get into it. So just to catch you guys up, I'm going to go through the QBs really quick. Malik Willis signed with the Miami Dolphins, 3 years, 67 million. So he gets a nice little payday there. Um, by the way, so we do have a chat while we do this, and Fletch is saying I'm putting him on blast for free labor. No, we give of our time because we love this. This is our hobby that we hope to one day be lucratively taken care of in the hundreds of pounds that I'm sure will come to us eventually in free drink tokens at some Manchester bar in the future, I'm sure. Anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, Malik Willis, Miami Dolphins, 3 years, 67 million. Good fit, or should he have maybe tried to go to somewhere else?
Well, they were in desperate need of a QB, obviously, to going to Falcons. But at the same time, I think it is a good fit. They need someone. Malik Willis has done the job at the Packers, so we can't complain at that. So why not?
I mean, why not take a flyer, I guess?
I mean, it's not a flyer. It's probably around, I believe it's about it's at least a 2 year deal, I would say, Tom. So,
Yeah, so
but
it's
it's opportunity. There's Waddles there, Achan's there. I believe they have a tight end that's decent. It's not like a terrible, terrible team, but
no,
it's not a
I
great
don't
team.
mean a flyer in terms of like, oh, it's a total unknown. But what I mean is, obviously, we have seen Malik Willis with the Titans, and he wasn't so
Oh,
successful.
yes.
But with the Packers, he's proven his worth, especially when when Jordan Love was out. He performed really well, especially, in that game against well, against the Ravens. And, he kind of showed his dual threat ability and that he can potentially be a starter in this league. So I think they saw enough, and especially it being, the brain trust who were in Green Bay of John Eric Sullivan and what's the head coach's name? Um,
I
uh,
could never remember his name either, Tom. You keep vamping. I'll find it.
yeah, but I think there's some
Uh,
continuity there.
Jeff
Jeff
Hafley.
Hafley, right?
Jeff Hafley is not the
Yeah.
name of a Super Bowl winning quarterback coach. I'm sorry. No one named Hafley is winning
But
this.
yeah,
I'm
but the
sorry.
fact that they've seen him firsthand in the building, it
Mm.
just made a natural fit for him to go to Miami and go with them and develop. And
Mm.
as you said, they've got weapons. They've got Achan, they've got Waddle. So yeah, we'll have to.
Yeah.
I wish them all the success. So
Yeah. There you go. The other quarterback change, which was the Raiders traded Geno Smith to the Jets for, I believe, some lower round picks. Move makes sense. Geno is on the other side of probably whatever his career is, and they just need some stability, of which I think he can provide that. I think there's for as poor as the Jets play, I don't think it's devoid of talent there. And I think, well, again, I don't think you're winning 10 games with Geno at this point on the Jets. Don't think they're built for that. He at least gives you a floor that I think is,
full circle
decent.
moment for Gino though, because
Yeah.
he started there and now he's going back there. So
yeah, it could be a
definitely
full
full
circle
circle.
moment.
He was drafted there. Obviously, didn't go right. Got punched in the mouth and broke his jaw opening season that year for not paying back a flight. But I think he's definitely changed himself a lot since then. And it'll be interesting to see if there might be some sort of redemption story there. I don't think it's a terrible move on either part there. Uh, that's pretty much. I mean, we knew about Tua. We knew about. Oh well, no. The other big one would be Kyler Murray signing a one. Excuse me, signing a 1 year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. Um,
That's a perfect fit.
you think?
Yeah. Well, KOC is known as a QB whisperer. Kyler Murray, that's a cheap deal for them. He's on Vetmen, I think.
Yes.
So with that, it's a perfect fit. It's a prove it deal. Plus, he also got written in that he couldn't be franchise tagged or future tagged or anything like that. So it is literally a prove it deal for him. So I think it's a good fit.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Plus
Go ahead,
I
Tom.
agree.
nine.
I think that him being well, and it seems as though he's going to be the starter as opposed to like at least from all the reporting that's been announced since he signed the deal with the Vikings. He signed it on a stipulation that he would be the starter, maybe not competing with obviously JJ McCarthy really struggled last season, so be interesting to see if in the first 4 or 5 games that Kyler Murray plays, if he can, get back to that sort of standard that he set in 2020 when he was playing, I mean, he's a two-time Pro Bowler quarterback, so like he's done some things in this league, and with a better team than the Cardinals, I just think if he's got the right talent around him, throwing to Justin Jefferson's not gonna hurt as well. So I really
No.
hope he does succeed, especially as a guy that supported the Vikings from. I mean, even in his presser, I don't know if you saw, but he said that he cried when Brett Favre threw that pick against the Saints in 2009. So clearly, through and through, Minnesota Vikings fan.
I love that your love for people's fandom makes you root for them. Whereas a hardcore dead inside American, that just makes me go, I hope nothing good happens. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, I forgot. Look, I'm just pulling all sorts of quarterback news out my butt right now. There was another big signing, which we knew about, and this is one slightly more controversial, but Daniel Jones is emulating Kirk Cousins without the success in that he signs a 2 year, $100 million deal, 88 base which just blows my mind. Um, my thing is, I think it totally made sense for the Colts to stay with Daniel Jones, but they also did it in a way where he kind of had them over a barrel yet again, and he's got really good agents because he did the same thing to the Giants. I hope that Daniel Jones, recovers and comes back
When
and
they when they traded
hmm,
when they traded for Sauce, though, they really hooked their wagon to Daniel Jones.
yeah.
You know,
I
when
mean,
you give up 2 first-round picks,
yeah,
you're like, I trust the quarterback I've got.
And
yeah.
you're right, Chapman. He's a generational bag getter. That is for sure. I like the deal. Well, I like the deal for him because he's getting a load of money, but I'm not really sure with the Colts. I mean, as you said, he had them over a barrel, but they just spend so much money, with that, and then the signing of Alec Pierce as well. They don't really have a lot of draft capital as well, so they're really going all in with Daniel Jones these next 2 years.
Well, I mean, I don't think they had any other choice, just to be really honest with you, at that point, as Batch said. So, excuse me. I buried the lead, guys, because I got so excited about talking about Justin Fields. I thought it was a really clever way for me to open the show, and but I forgot to mention to our listeners that it's a special episode today. We have one of our first guests on Hurdle the Line who will be joining us in the next 5-ish minutes, so stay tuned. His name is Phil Cartlich. Is that how I say his name? Did I get it?
I think you got it.
I think I got
I
it.
think so.
I'm already. I already have. What's the most politically correct way of saying this? I have an issue with saying people's names, and then I also live in a different country, so that's really great. Like for me, right? So Phil's going to be coming on. Phil has created this thing called the Franchise Stability Index, and he scores that for all 32 teams. He's going to be talking to us about that. He has, I think I believe he's on Twitter, a bunch of stuff. Anyway, he's going to tell us a lot about that, and we're going to interview him and talk about that for the pretty much the bulk of the show. But he is a Ravens fan. And our next news item, which hopefully will lead into that conversation with our man Phil when he gets on, is talk about the biggest news probably over the last week in the NFL, which was the Raiders thought they had a deal for Maxx Crosby to trade him to the Ravens for 2 number one picks. However, the Ravens quickly on Tuesday, I think, announced that they were nixing the deal. Well, actually, they didn't announce it. The Raiders announced that the Ravens were nixing the deal due to a failed physical on Maxx Crosby's part. Max was in the building of the Ravens, was seen by their doctors, and they believe that is the knee, right? That the knee was could explode at any time. No, had issues where that could be really long-term damaging to his career, and they pulled out. Shortly after that, I believe the next day, the Ravens signed the number one D end on the free agency market, which was Trey Hendrickson, giving him, let's look into this here. He got 4 years, 112 million, 60 guaranteed, which if you think about it, giving up which would have been less of what they would have been paying Maxx Crosby, and you didn't have to give 2 number one picks. Woo, it's a lot. Technically, because there was no deal made, because there was still the agreement was during the legal tampering period, and the Ravens pulling out on it. They have done nothing wrong, and so there's not going to be any investigation. So it doesn't matter why they pulled out or whatever. It's bad business, maybe. But yes, a lot to unpack there. I'm going to throw to you, Tom, first, and then we'll go to Batch because I think Batch is going to be very AFC North heavy on this one. What are your thoughts? You can pick the Raiders, you can pick the Ravens, you can pick Maxx Crosby. I don't care. Where do you want to go?
I think for Maxx Crosby, and what an absolute whirlwind for him to, be in Baltimore. And then it sounds like while he was there, while he was doing the physical, they were actually talking to Trey Hendrickson at that point anyway. So, they clearly had an idea that, something was not going to work out. And then, it ended up not working out anyway. As you said with the knee, it seems like the degenerate knee like injury That even though in the short term, he could come back and be healthy, that they think in the longer term they didn't want to risk the move, thinking that he's going to be really struggling with that knee injury 2 years down the line when it's a 3 year, was it a 3 year deal or was it a 4 year deal?
4 year deal.
Yeah, 4 year deal. So they thought that two and a half years in that he'd be struggling with this knee and then they'd be living with the ramifications of that. So that's why they backed out. But then what I found interesting was that Eric Da Costa then came out afterwards, was talking about it, was talking about how much regret they had for it and what have you, but then also said, "Oh no, we were trying to pair Maxx Crosby and Trey Hendrickson, which I do not believe a single word of. He's just trying to smooth over the situation." But with the Raiders, it put them in such a difficult position because, the amount of money they'd spend in free agency to bring in lots of top tier free agents, Tyler Linderbaum and, Quay Walker and such. For Maxx Crosby to be back on their books for this season, I mean, he could still get moved. Who knows? But it's just a bizarre situation. I mean, we've had things like this happen before, but not to this scale in a while anyway.
Yeah, it's wild. Batch, talk to me.
In my opinion, I think they got him in. They realised that again, like Tom said, there's a chance it could be the knee because it was a full meniscus repair rather than a meniscus trim, which obviously is a little bit more time to heal anyway. But also they gave up a lot for him and they realized that they can get someone who's quite a big influence anyway on a free and pay him less money and not have to give up the draft capital, which we actually mentioned last time. It was the first time they had ever give up a first round pick for a player in a trade. So it was very difficult. But one thing I want to say is how Maxx Crosby has come out and been an ultimate professional about it. He's not come out and slagged off the Ravens or said anything negative about the Ravens.
No, he has not. And speaking of the Ravens, we have been joined.
He just said,
"Oh, Raven." Yeah. Speaking of the Ravens, we are joined by our guest who I mentioned earlier. Phil, how are you, sir?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for having me, guys. What a point for me to jump in on, eh?
Well, we saved it knowing I was looking at the time, knowing you were going to join us around 8:30, so it's good. We've sorted around the houses. Tom kind of started with a little bit about talking about Maxx Crosby. Batch talked a little bit about the Ravens versus as a Ravens fan, also an Alabama fan, which now I'm sad I didn't wear my Georgia stuff today. But first of all, welcome to Hurdle Line. We're really happy to have you, and we look forward to talking to you about your franchise index. But we'd love to have, obviously as a Baltimore Ravens fan, love to get your point of view. And honestly, as somebody who's slightly neutral on this, I haven't really said much yet. Shit happens, and we usually don't cuss on the pod. And then I'm usually the one yelling at people for cussing, but you do what you do to win. And that's sort of where I fall on it. But Phil, love to hear your take as a Ravens fan.
Yeah, absolutely. So the move itself was like really out of character for us. We're not the type of side that goes spending all that capital in free agency. So when the move first happened, it was a really big surprise. But obviously one to get really, really excited about. He's a top 3 edge in the league and he's probably not number 3. So the opportunity to have a guy join your team like that is always exciting in spite of the capital that you're looking at giving up. But I suppose the analogy I'd use as a Ravens fan, and I had this conversation back and forth with a good pal of mine who's a big Raiders fan, is if you go to buy a secondhand car, no matter how pretty it looks in the showroom, you're not going to part with that kind of hard-earned money until you've had a good look under the hood and really checked it out and given it the once over. You might be really excited by the prospect of buying that secondhand car. You might have even had a photograph taken sat in the driver's seat, pumped it all over social media and said, look at this car I'm going to buy. But then when you actually have a look at it and you kind of do the work, that car, no matter if you're going to spend your hard-earned pennies on it, is no good to you sat on your driveway for the next 3 years, unable to drive. And so when the doctors have looked at Crosby's knee, we knew he was having surgery. We knew what the state of play was. We knew that he wouldn't pass a traditional physical. Of course, we knew that. He's had a meniscus repair. It wasn't just a clean up; it was a full repair. So yeah, he was never going to be ready to go. But you've got to think that for them to pull out of the deal, they've looked at the long-term health, the longer kind of aspects of this, and been worried about the potential of the investment at the cost as it was. There's got to have been something more. It doesn't surprise me that one of the independent doctors they used was Dr. Cooper, who also works for the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys are very much out of the Maxx Crosby sweepstakes now for similar kind of reasons. It all lines up for Crosby to come out and play for the Raiders this year and put up lofty numbers, have a 17, 18 sack season, and everyone go, well, look at you, thought you could have your cake and eat it type of thing. But to me, I think it speaks to the risk associated with a very un-Ravens-like move, and them obviously seeing something that they weren't happy with for a longer-term projection.
No, and I think that's love the analogy. Great insight from you. And and I also just think the history of these kinds of moves, which is one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about. We usually have our host Ollie on, and we've been chatting a little bit about just sort of like when is the right time to trade number one picks and what do you trade it for? And traditionally, a defensive player, especially one at the age that Maxx Crosby, even though Maxx Crosby is great, he's actually one of my, I would say, top 5 favorite non-Falcon. Well, I don't really have any Falcons favorite players, to be honest, at this point, outside of Bijan in London. But I will like Walker eventually, I'm sure. But sorry, that was a side thing. But no, just saying that for real. I mean, these are such big risks, and honestly, like if Ink isn't signed, as you say, it is what it is. The only thing about this, though, which is this, going back to this, and we're going to button this up because, Phil, we brought you on to talk about this franchise stability index, and we need to get to it. But at nauseum is just the really interesting thing I did not think about until listening to another podcast I'm a big fan of, is the idea that this move made a lot of other people go ahead and react to and make other moves, not just on the defensive end front, but just also in like, well, we don't have the money for that, so we're going to go ahead and do this, and all the what ifs then. And I don't blame the Ravens for that either, because it's like, it's just what happened. But it's just really interesting, the sliding doors, if you will, the classic Gwyneth Paltrow 90s movie, where if Maxx Crosby had never, had not gone, would there have been, before and there was no deal, would Trey have ended up somewhere else, or, who knows? It's just very, very interesting. So we'll never know. But it is, it's good. There's some other bits on free agency we're going to hit, but honestly, it's just a lot of like smaller moves, and it's been a big week. Next week, we're going to be probably shifting into draft talk. So go look it all up. Phil, before I ask you the number one question that we're going to ask you to get these things rolling, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What got you into football? If you can do that just in a really quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was like a lot of people, kind of 90s, growing up in the 90s, early teen in the 90s. My uncle was kind of swept up in the big wave of the NFL in the kind of 80s, when the first kind of round of Brits really took to the game. And every year he used to record me the Super Bowl on VHS. And I would watch it as a youngster, kind of over the mornings before I went to school that kind of following week. The first one I ever really took to, where I really felt like I understood the game and kind of knew what was going on, was the Ravens Super Bowl victory in the kind of 2001 season when we beat the Giants. And that was it. I was hooked from there. I went off to university in 2004. And when I got there, it was like, right, what am I going to do for 3 years? I'm a sportsman. I've always been able to turn my hand to most sports. But it was like, right, what are you going to do for 3 years? Are you going to play for the university's fourth team? at football, our football, soccer, or are you going to try something different? So for 3 years, I played Brit ball, university ball across here. Absolutely loved it. And then kind of really from there, I mean, and I've spoken to Fletch like several times about it. Like I have this inability to say no. I have this kind of obsessive compulsive itch to scratch. And when I start something, like I get a little bit obsessive. So it was fantasy football, and then it was dynasty, and then it was Devi, and then my love of college football kind of came to the fore. And yeah, I guess I'm just a frustrated armchair GM more than anything, with a big mouth.
And just decided to become an Alabama fan as they go on this historic run of 7 national championships, not to mention God knows how many other bowl games. Just happened to join that, guys.
I get that a lot, but the truth to that is it was an extension of loving the Ravens. Obviously, we had Ozzie Newsome, longtime GM, and I was fascinated with this idea of how we always. I love the draft. And I was always fascinated by how we went back to Alabama, and we seemed to get this kind of steady wave of talent coming from Alabama. So I was like, right, okay, so what is this? What is this, this kind of pipeline all about? And I looked it up a little bit more. And then I discovered my kind of spirit animal in Nick Saban, like, the man, the myth, the legend, and became a little bit obsessed with the process and, everything that made that team great. And to be fair, it just so happened to coincide with one of the most dominant eras in college football, but it was a happy little accident, I promise you.
No, and we always love hearing the origin stories about how people pick their team. And this is a UK podcast, but you can still call football. We just say American football here, just so in this obsessiveness, it sounds like you've come up with this this system that you're calling the franchise stability index, which we have some questions about in terms of some of the teams. But give us the origin of that. Sort of like how did you get the idea for it? How did it start? And what sort of was what kind of not hypothesis, but what was the sort of the genesis of what you were wanting to try to achieve with it when you first started coming up with it?
Yeah, cool. So all Dynasty fantasy football players, everyone, all the hosts, all play a bit of Dynasty. Yeah, fab. So basically what happened was I was sat in a WhatsApp chat with a bunch of Dynasty League mates, and one of them had the audaciousness to declare that Trevor Lawrence was a bust. And that was it. That was the hot take. Trevor Lawrence is a bust. And it just got me all going inside. It got me all worked up. I took the bait because I'd done the legwork. I'd watched him at Clemson. I'd watched this guy who was an absolute, the word generational gets thrown around a lot. But in, post Andrew Luck, he was by far and away the best quarterback prospect I'd seen and I'd watched in college football. And it just brought about this question that we all talk about anecdotally. Everybody kind of discusses it. Do quarterbacks fail because they're not good enough, or because or the environment they land in, does that fail them? We're so quick to throw that term out, bust, and it just set me. It said I'm a maths teacher by day, high school maths teacher, and it kind of set my maths mind racing. Could we quantify something that we talk about anecdotally? In terms of where guys end up and just how much that situation kind of hurts, hinders, helps their development as prospects.
That's awesome. By the way, Tom Batch, I know, so we already asked the crew to come up with a couple of questions. So you guys jump in when you want to in terms of the question, but we'll keep things rolling. All right. So Trevor Lawrence is on a team that's unstable, should we say? Could you name some other quarterbacks right now that might be in the same place as him, who might have the talent? Like, let's say, Sam Darnold, great example of that situation with the Super Bowl. Is there anybody that's sticking out to you right now, maybe young quarterback or quarterback has been a couple of years, that you might feel like, if they could be somewhere that's slightly better? Is there one or two that stick out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously once you started to do the digging, there was quite a few guys, not just Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, he was drafted into absolute chaos when he ended up in Jacksonville. The early years under Urban Meyer, It's no coincidence that he started to look better when he got Doug Peterson and a little bit of stability. But Baker Mayfield is another perfect example, a guy who was drafted into chaos at the Browns. It took him 2 or 3 stops to reestablish himself. Again, Sam Darnold, you mentioned. Obviously, Justin Fields has moved again today. But Justin Fields is another guy whose talent as a prospect far outweighed the situation he ended up in. And you may well see that it wouldn't surprise me if he's the next guy. Now he's got a year under Andy Reid, backing up Mahomes. He might well start a few games at the start of the season. Wouldn't surprise me to see his talent kind of almost self-correct in the same manner that some of these other guys did. I think the perfect A/B test actually comes from the 2023 draft when you look at how Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were drafted. Obviously, Bryce Young was drafted into an absolute dumpster fire situation in Carolina that is only starting to kind of self-correct now, whereas CJ Stroud was drafted into a much more stable situation where he's maybe not gone on to actually hit the heights that he had shown in his rookie year, but he was drafted into a much more stable situation. And what you see is one of them go on to win Rookie of the Year, and one of them fighting for his job with Andy Dalton, as it was back then. So yeah, there's lots. Caleb Williams is another one. Will Ben Johnson bring the stability around and that allows him to flourish, or will they cut ties before he ever gets a chance to get things rolling? It looks like they're starting to make smart decisions, but some of these franchises stay bad for reasons because whether ownership gets involved, whether politics gets involved and the GM's out before they've got a chance to actually allow this kid opportunity to develop. But it's the cyclical nature of guys looking to protect their own jobs and their own interests.
So would you say?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Tom, you go first, Tom.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up those sort of guys, the guys that have got a bit of a kind of second chance as well. But I wanted to ask you, what is the main thing based on the model that impacts the index the most? Is it, whether they have a functional offensive line, whether they have, a functional head coach, or, overall stability in the franchise? Like, what is the main factor that relates?
Yeah, cool. That's a great question, Tom. Thanks, man. So I use 4 measures, all slightly different in weighting. The first being coaching stability. Every time there's a head coach or OC change, that quarterback has to learn a brand new language. Now, it may be that the staple diet of the playbook stays the same. But every coach and every tree has a different verbiage, a different way of calling the plays, getting the plays to the line. And a young QB might have just spent his first year immersed in learning everything, only for it to change again. Now, if you take Trevor Lawrence as the example, Urban Meyer was gone before the end of his first season. The guy that was the OC then stepped up temporarily, and then Peterson came in. So he's had 3 potential verbiage changes in that first season. That changes absolutely everything. Even if you take a look at guys in the last couple of years who look like they've made a good start, even Trevor Lawrence, again, most recently, losing Liam Cohen. Sorry, no, not losing Liam Cohen. Why am I struggling to think where? Oh, sorry, excuse me. Baker Mayfield leaving Tampa just as he settles, and Liam Cohen coming to Jacksonville. Right. Gives Baker a brand new verbiage to learn again. Now, he's not considered a young QB anymore, but you see how there's regression there in that OC change. Every time these guys move on, there's a brand new language to learn. So that is massive. So that takes up kind of 40% of the number that we spit out at the end of it. 30% is institutional health and win percentage over a 3-year kind of basis. There's this idea that some good teams do stay good and bad teams stay bad. Looking at the Cleveland Browns, for example, in spite of some of the talented guys they've had through the door, that kind of institutional win and winning culture, if you like, massively helps the QB in those kind of formative years. Trying to look at sack rate, so sack allowed on passing dropbacks, gives you an idea of offensive line protection and the environment the QB is kind of performing in and being asked to kind of do things in. So that takes up 20%. And then 10% is given to offensive skill position spending. Are they investing with offensive weapons to support that QB in their development? It's all kind of weighted, with coaching continuity mattering the most, and then winning culture down to protection, and then the weapons that they support them with. And basically what we do is we kind of throw that into a spreadsheet, kind of work it all out, and it spits out a number basically between 0 and 100. Anything from 65 to 80 is a stable environment. Anything above 80, I think we can consider elite. And there are only a couple of teams that actually make that at the moment. Volatile is anything then that falls between 50 and 65%, with anything sub 50% being considered a kind of dangerous environment for QB development. One of the early pushbacks is that when people have seen some of the numbers on the teams, they've not really understood that it's about FSI is not about how good a team is. It's about how safe an environment is for a quarterback to develop inside. And once we kind of get the idea that there's a key difference there, it doesn't predict QB success. It predicts developmental safety. And I think a couple of people kind of struggle to get the hang of the fact that it's not necessarily it's not a power ranking. It's not a 32 team NFL power ranking. It's about how stable that environment has been over a period of time that would allow a young talent to develop in that system.
But then just quickly based off that, I actually have a question for one of the guys. He isn't on the podcast tonight, but he wanted to ask you some questions. So he said to ask, how had the Dolphins got a better grade than the Seahawks, who won the Super Bowl, when, as you're saying, there's kind of coaching turnover and what have you that they've had in Miami as well. So I'm just kind of interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously Seattle overwent a kind of wholesale change. They've lost a couple of the big contracts in terms of where the offensive spending was. They have also kind of gone through their coaching transition, whereas Miami, over the course of 3 years, had spent well, have competitive win rates. They're over 500 over the last 3 years. Their actual kind of win percentage, which counts for 30% of the program, is very, very similar over 3 years to where Seattle was. The big thing goes to show getting the right coaching and how that can absolutely take things leaps and bounds. But if you look where Seattle have jumped in just the last year, it shows just how important that kind of right network around them is. And obviously, with it being a 3-year average, where coaching continuity counts for the most in terms of the scoring, Mike McDaniel had no OC change and no head coaching change in the last 3 years, a win percentage over 500, and an elite spending when you look at what they were spending to support Tua in terms of the contracts given to Jalen Waddle, to Tyreek Hill, obviously in a significant amount of the cap. And when these guys were healthy, when Tua was being protected, Tua spat out a league-leading kind of passing yardage season. There's an awful lot of factors that maybe don't get considered by the model, other than that kind of institutional health. And Seattle have absolutely caught lightning in a bottle. And you will see that over the next couple of years, obviously, as Miami into a rebuild, you could expect to see that 3-year average drop for Miami and raise for Seattle.
And just for the viewers at home, so it's a point system, which we're looking at right now. And Miami is at 66, I believe. Sorry, I don't have my glasses with me. Yes, I'm that age now. So if you can read, and then Seattle is at 62.0, Miami is at 66. So we're only talking about, and there's only one team between them, which is Pittsburgh Steelers, just for our viewers at home. Also, Tom, you can mention who said that. It's Ollie, our
it's Ollie,
just one of our guys.
Yeah, he's
just some random dude in the back that we don't.
Yeah. He's not just some random guy. But yeah, he usually would be on the podcast, but he couldn't make it tonight, so
Yeah.
I'd ask him on behalf
These
of him.
they're really important questions because somebody will look at Seattle winning the Super Bowl and going, "Hang on a minute, how can there be an environment that scores worse than Miami?" But I think the importance of those 3-year averages and the reason they're so important is to avoid overcorrection. And to look at the environment over a period of time. And 3 years as the measure is because you would want a young QB to have 3 years in a system to really be allowed to develop. And like I said, you would now expect with Mike McDonald in place, obviously Seattle take another whack because Clint Kubiak's out and there's a new OC appointment again. So there's new verbiage to be learned. It's that instability in terms of what's around that QB. Now, Sam Darnold is in a position in his career where he's been able to embrace that and make the most of it. He's had a couple of stops along the way to self-correct. But yeah, we'll see what happens next. But it's a great question because, like I said, it's just important to understand it's not a 32-team power ranking in terms of how good the team is.
I think that's it. I think it's just about understanding what actually goes into it, that it's not every single aspect. It's, as you said, those 3 fundamental things broken down. So
absolutely. Again, when you look at where Seattle are heading over the next couple of years, that at the moment they've unloaded a lot of their major contracts. Now I know the offensive skill spending is only 10%, but at some point in the next year or so, they're going to have a decision to make about how they pay JSN. They've obviously freed up and moved on Kenneth Walker in order to be able to make sure that they've only got that one decision to potentially make when that money needs tying up. But the second that, let's be honest, JSN, if he replicates anything near what he's done this season, he's going to be getting a market-setting deal at the top of the wide receiver market. That, again, with the increased win percentage, with that kind of, O-line performance, they've got a very, very good O-line this season. Over the next couple of years, you'll see that self-correct and level itself out over the 3 years.
It's interesting because this is like the classic existential argument in life, which is it nature versus nurture? And it seems you're trying to quantify the nurture part in these franchises, which I think is really, really interesting. Let's get really specific here. We obviously have a top quarterback at the top of the draft, which I think, generally speaking, Mendoza, excuse me. We all kind of assume he's going to the Raiders, first pick, makes a lot of sense. Heisman winner, national championship winner, great. Just seems like his floor as a professional is probably quite high. But then there's some guys under him that I question whether there's probably not another first round graded quarterback on here, but it's still pretty early and we shall see. But I'm going to pick one that I have a personal relationship with and just ask you based on the traits, which you would say. So let's go with Carson Beck. Obviously started for Georgia, really wanted things to work out, goes to Miami, has a great year, plays in the national championship. Watching as much college ball as I have, he's a very good college quarterback, not a great one. Can be very inconsistent, but it's very much helped by the talent around him. At Georgia, it was a great defense, and he lost some of those elite skill players that his predecessor had, which didn't allow him to succeed. He goes to Miami, he gets some of those weapons back. In looking at the potential landing spots for him, where would somewhere be that you would think would be a stable, successful place for him to go? If you had to pick, even if somebody who maybe has somebody there, but I'm just curious to his skill set.
So for context, in terms of how I'd like to use this moving forward, is I want to couple this with traditional kind of scouting reports in terms of taking the FSI environment for a player and those kind of predictive. You read a scouting report and it tells you about something like processing speed. It tells you about pocket poise, adaptability, mental resilience. Like what I want to do is I've tried to build a kind of comfort matrix that looks at where QB's skill sets are from a traditional scouting context, and then look at the environments that they might land in and kind of look and say, if you take a player, I'm just going to pivot slightly and take a player like Diego Pavia, who is a potential day 3 guy, probably a priority UDFA at this point. But thrives in chaos and needs his game is built on more of a lack of structure, an organized bedlam. Let's be quite honest. He would need less structure to survive because his skill set is scrambling and things like that mean that he maybe doesn't need that elite offensive line for him to sell what he brings to the table. However, guys like Carson Beck might need a little bit more. Now, I think Carson Beck is the ideal kind of day 2 quarterback for a team picking in the back half of the draft. Take, and again, maybe not the perfect example because they took Will Howard in a similar situation in hopes of developing Will Howard. But Carson Beck to me would be a very safe Pittsburgh Steeler. The opportunity to use his skill set, the opportunity to use a clipboard year behind Aaron Rodgers, assuming he comes back. But the type of guy that with the elite offensive line, the investment in the receiving weapons, he would be able to thrive in an environment that is stable, where there's that coaching continuity. Obviously, again, that's changed for Pittsburgh for the first time in the best part of 20 years. But all being the way that franchise operates, that would be somewhere where a skill set of Carson Beck's that is perhaps somewhat limited, perhaps relies on rhythm, timing, anticipation, would be able to thrive without needing to be relied on to go off script more. However, like I say, the flip side of that is I do genuinely think he would struggle the second you put him in any of a more volatile situation. So take the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, I'm looking down my list for volatile at the moment. There's not a great deal that you would maybe argue really need quarterbacks. Obviously, Atlanta have taken. Who have you guys just taken? Why am I blanking?
Tua. Well, Penix, and then the Tua. Honestly.
Yeah, vet minimum contract. That's by the way, that's a perfect situation for Tua. Again, the more volatile the situation, the less I would expect Carson Beck to be able to survive. Now, what would be an absolute nightmare for a player with a portfolio like Carson Beck's and a scouting report like Beck's would be to end up as a franchise that are a danger zone franchise. Okay, that would not be. So, for example, I would hate to see him end up in an Arizona Cardinal. Arizona are obviously shopping for QBs. They are in that market. Lots of decisions to make because they're not really in the ideal spot to take a guy in the first round. They're going to struggle to find a trade partner that's going to move all the way back to give them what they need. So maybe they go shopping day 2. Carson Beck, that would be a tragic move for him because he has not got a skill set to survive that traditional instability that a situation like Arizona offers up.
You're basically saying Joe Burrow is the best quarterback that's ever happened in the NFL, if we're talking about chaos franchises and being able to overcome it. But we'll talk about that another time. Fletch, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So I had one question that I was looking, because obviously, look, the notes that you sent through when we were planning for the episode are incredible. Like the amount of the stuff that's in there for us. So what I wanted to look at in terms of franchise stability is asking you where things like ownership fall into it. And you look at, there's a couple of franchises at the moment. You look at what the Giants are going through with, we're not going to say why their owners are giving ownership stakes to the children, but the owners are giving ownership stakes to the children. You look at things like the Bears, obviously had a ownership change last year. The Colts, for devastating reasons, had an ownership change last year. And Carly's been fantastic. The Texans have had one in recent years. The Commanders have obviously had an ownership change in recent years. How do things like that factor into the way you view a franchise stability index? Obviously, the football side of it will carry so much more weight, but does it account for things like ownership and how ownership things change?
I think the important thing is anytime there is an institutional change at that level, that if you didn't cover it for that period of 3 years, there's no opportunity for it to correct. There's the risk of overcorrection. What we want to see is we want to see that change over time to get a more stable. And I think it's interesting that you use the Colts as an example because the Colts are currently a very, very stable franchise on the verge of entering that kind of elite tier at 80 plus. They're currently sat on 77.1 in a really, really healthy position. And that transition, you're right, wasn't in quite tragic circumstances. But to overreact to Carly's first year, good, bad, or indifferent, would be naive of the project, because it's about what can they. The Colts are a perfect position, by the way. Maybe they would have been a better example to talk about your Carson Becks, a day two guy. They are elite offensive line and in a really, really good position to support a lot of our QBs who perhaps lack that traditional, not those kind of blue chip day one prospects with a couple of warts on their profile. But yeah, to answer your question, Fletch, I think it's important that it's measured over time to avoid that overcorrection, be it good, bad, or indifferent. Because what you tend to find then is the bad franchises. Ooh, that sounds ugly, doesn't it? And I don't want fan bases to go chasing after me for saying that. But traditional fan bases and franchises who find themselves at the top end of the draft year in, year out, making those cyclical mistakes. All right. And I will name a couple. Cleveland, the Jets, they stay up there for a reason, because they're not learning the lesson. Now, the Jets are in a brilliant position this year. I realize I'm rambling and I've probably not answered your question, but the Jets are in a brilliant position over the next couple of years to do something really smart. They're around with 5 first-round picks over the next couple of years. Franchise stability would say right now they are nowhere near ready to take a quarterback. For example, it would be ridiculous of them to entertain trading that capital up to take Fernando Mendoza, because as good as Mendoza is, they are not in a position to develop him. Aaron Glenn already finds himself on a hot seat after year one. The owner is maniacal and doesn't seem to learn those lessons. But all of a sudden, there they are with those 5 first-round picks. Franchise stability would say, develop the infrastructure around the quarterback, pop your quarterback in at the end. All right, not vice versa. There are other teams that can afford to do it the other way. But those ties down there in the danger zone, absolutely not.
Well, he is going to the team that's rated second worst on your thing. So, but I would say that's probably I think if you, after the off season, with some of the stability that they have coming in with an offensive head coach who's not 70 years old, the offensive line that they're building there, obviously with the center that they brought over, and whose name is it Linderbaum? Forgot his name.
Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah, Linderbaum. And then also the draft capital they also have. Well, they had, sorry, but is it different there because Mendoza has a higher floor? And I mean, again, it doesn't change the team stability, obviously, but does it does it tweak it up a little? And then I know it's a 3-year mark, which we also have to appreciate. They've gone through, this is the 3rd coach in 3 years, so they're going to get really banged for that. But the better question is there like a marker of this could be rising? Do you have another program where you get to see the where they're rising because of different moves they make over an offseason? I guess probably
Sure.
not.
Now, this is the first year that we've actually it's come to life. There is obviously the opportunity to look at the year in, year out marks and see where those improvements come. And then obviously the subsequent study will be why they come. But you're right to point out what you point out. Now, Fernando Mendoza has, when you take that traditional scouting report for a player like him, he becomes, to me and to the model, a safe prospect in elite, stable, and volatile tiers. And his profile, the fact that he's got proven composure, pocket command behind bad O-line play in his time at Cal, before he transferred to Indiana, he's in a better position to survive chaos than most. But even Mendoza, you increase the risk when you drop him in full-blown dysfunction, which is why I think it's really important that they've invested where they have in terms of his O-line, bringing in Tyler Linderbaum. I would expect them to be very active in supporting him with weapons. A healthy Brock Bowers is always going to help everybody. And again, at some point, Brock Bowers is going to reset the tight end market. And when that happens, you'll see that cap on spending improve as well. So the Raiders will not want, nor do I think they'll have the number 1 pick again next year. And for that reason, now's the time. There's also that, let's be honest, these guys are building teams and they don't want to miss the opportunity to take that guy when he's there sat right in front of them and going to fall into their lap. So you always have to kind of battle that as well. It's not about, whether or not he's going to be the best quarterback or if he's worth the pick. Is he safe for them right now? And in that kind of method, you increase the risk dropping him in the Raiders, but he's better there to handle it than most, I'd say.
So I've got a question for you.
From
you've done this season's FSI. Do you see many teams jumping upwards from their last season's performances? Say, for instance, you've got New England Patriots, danger, 38.9.
Sure.
Do you see them jumping up massively next season when you do this?
Yeah, without a doubt. And the Patriots are a really good example. Now, the Patriots have got a win percentage. If you bear with me, I'll pull up the exact numbers.
I was going to say they went 3-14 last season or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the year before wasn't a great deal better. That put them in a position to land Drake May. But if I just have a little look-see, average win percentage over the last 3 years, 0.43, and that is including this year's march all the way to the Super Bowl and their regular season record this year, bumping that up significantly. If you actually look year upon year for the Patriots, 0.235 in 23 and 24. So 3 and 14 records in both of those seasons are going to account massively into that figure. Now, they are the perfect case, again, a really interesting case study because they have their guy in Drake May. They now have their coach in Mike Vrabel. I suppose one thing that's missing from the measurement at the moment is just what an impact elite coaching has. I suppose the only way you'll see it through the model is over time, there won't be as many corrective changes, and coaching stability and continuity is obviously a 40% of the pillars. So you will see it correct over time. But they are a team that, are massively going to take a jump. Obviously, they've got a lot of cap to spend as well, and are looking to, surround him with weapons. They're a team that are massively on the up, massively. I would also kind of point out, I really like what Carolina are doing. And at the moment, they're still flirt with the danger zone. They're on 42.9, so they're almost out of it. But year upon year, we're seeing the improvements there that have, how Dave Canales has settled the ship there and allowed Bryce Young to start to develop. They're surrounding the weapons in a slightly different way. They're massively looking at doing it through the draft, which is going to keep the spending low. I like some of the moves that they're making, and they're a team that I would expect to improve as well. The one that I'm worried about, if I'm completely honest, is the Commanders. Obviously, Jaden Daniels was banged up last year, which has hurt them in terms of their score, because obviously they didn't expect, after going all the way to the NFC Championship the year prior, to be in such a predicament this year. It shows how important he is to them. But I'm a little bit concerned with how they invested around him this year. Obviously, a lot of money tied up in a player like Deebo Samuel. I realize it's a one-year contract and is a free agent again. But Austin Eckler, again, was where they decided to support him in the run game. Like, big money to old guys that might be well past their best. And hopefully they learn those lessons this year in terms of how they surround him. So, there's an awful lot that can change year in, year out. But they're some of the teams I would expect to take a massive upswing.
What about the Bears?
Sorry.
What about Chicago?
Yeah, again, a team that finally seems to have the guy in place in Ben Johnson. They appear to be making smart decisions. Obviously, Declan Doyle moving this year to Baltimore to be their new OC. knocks that one slightly. I know he was a non-play call in OC, but he's still an OC change for them, which kind of is going to hamper their score slightly. But they're another team where it's easy to like what they're doing. Obviously, moving DJ Moore on. DJ Moore, it sounds like I'm calling him a moron. Moving on from DJ Moore might be a better way of saying that one. Yeah, look, again, they're a team who appear to have their guy. Caleb Williams is an excellent talent. Obviously, they're going to be hampered by the fact that he was drafted into quite a chaotic situation. But as you've seen with some of those other guys, sticking with him and standing firm and being true to the kind of process allows you to see that growth from him eventually. And I'm pretty certain that, again, the importance of that coach there now and getting that right head coach in will allow him to prosper.
And I've just got one more for you, really, Phil, is in relation to the Eagles. Obviously, they've had a lot of turnover with the offensive coordinator position for Jalen Hurts. Like, how do you see that, like, as a stability? Because obviously they've had Nick Sirianni there for a while, but then with the offensive, coordinator, it's been, closing.
I actually was good. I had a kind of like similar question, Tom. I wanted to ask you, Phil, this, and maybe feel free to answer either way, but I was also going to say, when there's a coach who is a offensive minded coach, but still loses coordinators that are offensive minded, and underneath them, let's say a Zach Robinson who goes to Atlanta, leaving, like, we know Sean McVay doesn't need Zach Robinson,
Yeah.
but in certain examples, like, do you, or if a deep, like a Dan Quinn loses, not Clint Kubiak, gosh, loses, what's his name?
Cliff
Who was his
Kingsbury.
Yeah, Kingsbury. I mean, are you factoring that, or are we just doing head coaches? I guess are you getting that in the weeds?
Yeah. So at the moment, we literally just look at a head coach and OC change as equal footing. Obviously, every head coach and OC have their own makeup and have their own staff behind them. Like, so if you look at pivoting slightly, if you look at the 49ers, until this year have operated without a traditional guy in the OC role because Shanahan does it all. They've finally brought someone in this year to take on that role and that mantle. But when you look down the kind of history books and who was the OC for the 49ers in all the way from 2021, I think there's nobody. It was Shanahan and it was his ship. So it was very, very difficult to penalize them or praise them for it. It was like, but equally felt like, to be true to the process, you can't just remove them as an outlier. You're going to have to put them in there and ride with it as it is, because that's the situation. But no, to answer your question, at the moment, there's no real way of differentiating between who those coaches are and what roles they perform. We've got to treat them all equally for the integrity of the model, I think. But then to answer the question about Philadelphia are a really interesting side. Obviously, Harry Roseman, from the GM perspective there is something that we don't measure in the index, but you could make the argument that they are the one that, through their actions, builds that stable organization. It's them that's pulling the strings, and if they're getting their part right, the coach can do his job, has the freedom to kind of build the team the way they want. Obviously, Philadelphia build through the trenches year in, year out. They've got a surplus alignment that allows them to stay elite in those positions without affecting the spending massively. You're right, the instability around Jalen Hurts in terms of the coaching turnover hurts, no pun intended. But yeah, I think there's enough working in the Eagles' favor with the win-loss record, with the head coaching stability, at least in Sirianni, and the skill weapons that they're able to provide for him because of their approach to building through the trenches and replacing D linemen and O linemen at will, it seems, with the next guy up mentality. There's always seems to be the next guy ready to come in and play for them on those lines. They're a team over the next couple of years. Like, you can say what you want about where they're at. They've also got a Super Bowl to account for, and what this measure doesn't do is take Super Bowls into account. I'm sure the Eagles would take a year or two of instability if they decided they were going to retool or use that other R word, rebuild.
Otherwise, the Chiefs would be top if Super Bowls were, included.
No, yeah, absolutely. How nice it must be to not have to worry about your quarterback's position.
Oh yeah.
In 15 years, No, but the Eagles are an interesting case study because you can say what you want about Jalen Hurts as a quarterback and the way he plays and the style he plays and whether he's, to use the old Daniel Jeremiah analogy, is he a truck or a trailer? You can have all those arguments, but they are a stable franchise around him that allows him to pull the strings.
Brilliant. Thanks for that.
No worries, man.
Batch, you have one more question? Would you get the last one here?
How do you see the index evolving going forward? You've mentioned about outliers and things that it can or can't account for. Will there be changes going forward to the way you calculate your index?
Yeah, I think there's always lessons to learn, and you've always got to be reflective on it and look at building something that stands up to rigor that perhaps hasn't been accounted for already. One thing that it really doesn't do at the moment is it doesn't look at teams who build through defense. It's the old cliche, isn't it? Defense wins championships. And it's got no way at the moment of accounting for elite defenses supporting a QB and putting a QB in advantageous situations. I think that is something to consider. If you look at teams at the moment who have those kind of elite defenses, take Seattle, for example. I'm not saying for a moment Sam Darnold, JSN and co couldn't have done the business, but that team was built through that defense with a defensive head coach. So looking at how, and again, look at Vrabel, look at how the New England Patriots played. That defense right now, you would argue, is beyond where their offense is in terms of its development. Something, largely to do with Vrabel as the head coach. I'd be interested to look at how defensive security and defenses putting quarterbacks in advantageous situations can help those situations as well. In terms of over time, I guess what we want to see is we want to look at potential trends in the graphics over time. We want to look at teams that stay bad and why are they staying bad. We want to be able to look at what is it that has allowed some of the teams we've maybe identified earlier to improve and whether that actually takes fruition like we'd expect to see. So it's that year-on-year tracking of all 32 teams, that pre-draft FSI context for rookie QBs, like trying to marry up those safe landing spots to the QB profiles. I've kind of used the analogy the other day that drafting a quarterback into instability is like planting a seed in concrete. You're not going to allow it to grow. So identifying those right spots for those right players. But ultimately, I don't want it to be a hot take tool, which sometimes when I've gone through that process of releasing the 32 teams in 32 days, I guess it has, because, people see that power ranking side of things. But I don't want it to be a hot take tool. I want it to be a lens, a way we can look at stopping blaming players for systematic failures, and kind of getting a better missing part of the analysis that I think that's maybe not there at the moment.
Awesome. Phil, this has been fascinating. And I was going to steal your line to end this with, but then you stole it from me unknowingly. So thanks for that. Yes. This has been really great. Tell us really quickly, where can our audience of, I'm telling you, tens of tens, can find you and read more about this? What are you on Twitter? What other things can they check you out on?
Yeah, cool. So Twitter is the best one to find me, or X, whatever you want to call it, at Posh Plays FF. All the FSI stuff is linked on there. I've got 4 different articles now, a little bit more detail on matching up this new series of QBs to landing spots, perhaps, and that idea of a comfort matrix. The historical study in terms of where these guys have come from and what was the catalyst for the idea. And then also for the fantasy heads in there, how you can use this to help you with your fantasy football. You can catch me on the Dynasty Hot Seat Fantasy Pod. doing their Devi show once a fortnight. And then finally, any written work goes to In Between Media with the awesome Seth Woolcock and the team that he's got over there.
Excellent. Awesome.
Are you going to take the Browns out of your crosshairs now?
Yeah, go on. I noticed the hoodie. I'm sorry, Batch. All right. But, I stand by what I said. Bad teams stay bad for a reason, man.
But there's always hope in the NFL, which is why there's the draft and all sorts of other things that can happen. So you never know. Phil, thanks so much for joining us. And we appreciate you adjusting to this week from last week based on free agency. So really cool. I definitely will we'll be checking you out. We'd love to have you come back sometime, talk more, maybe post draft if you got time. And maybe we could talk about the quarterbacks and where they all landed and what you think about that. As always, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back next Monday with another show for you. We are 5 weeks away from the NFL draft, which is one of my favorite times of the year. Oh, I don't have a first round pick this year, so it's not going to be as exciting for me. Yes, I do make it about me when I want to. Thank you again to our guest, Phil. Thank you so much, Batch, Tom, for being on board. Fletch, as always, the super producer who writes no checks. 0 checks for us here, but we still love him anyway. We do it for the love of the game. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to subscribe to all the AAW stuff. It's just down below the episode description. I'm sure we'll put Phil's Twitter handle and whatnot down there, so you can click on that. Follow these guys. Follow us. We'll see you next week. Hurdle that stability index.